Okay, so we're gonna do something a little different. Once upon a time, Ubisoft decided that they liked Metal Gear so much they would take that and combine it with the boomer author to end all other boomer authors and create Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. Splinter Cell is a light and darkness-based stealth game released in 2002. It reached critical acclaim for its groundbreaking gameplay and light mechanics, stellar voice acting, and unforgiving yet fair difficulty. So with its success, they made 2 sequels, 2 different versions of a sequel after that, another sequel that changed the game entirely, and then a final sequel that changed the voice actor and was just not fantastic at all. Oh, and then there'll be a remake that I hope doesn't suck. The games are rich with an evolving story that follows an NSA agent named Sam Fisher and his covert ops team, Third Echelon. So hey, I see the Tom Clancy, but where is the Tom Clancy? The games did the Tom Clancy? What if I want a Tom Clancy? Boom, a Tom Clancy. Naturally, because Tom Clancy's name is attached, they made tie-in fiction about this. The egg came after the chicken, it seems. The books are decently reviewed, but with the most recent one upcoming, Firewall by James Swallow. Yeah, I don't think people are happy. So I was curious, would it really be that bad? I asked the publisher Aconyte Books for an early copy. I wasn't expecting anything, but the Mad Lads sent me 5 books for free, including the early review copy for Firewall. So, wow, thanks guys. After reading it, I'm now able to answer the pressing questions on everyone's mind. Is this book going to be that much of a dumpster fire? Is this indicative that Ubisoft hates not only their own employees, but their own IPs? Does James Swallow have what it takes to provide us with a faithful, exciting take on the Splinter Cell series? Will it even be good? Before we dive into the novel, let's take a look at the problem as a whole. To do that, we're gonna take a little trip back to the past to play some stealthy games and stealth ass. Let's divide the Splinter Cell games into 2 sets of 3. The old trilogy and the new one. The old trilogy is considered the god-tier level of stealth and espionage that the fans adore to death. Slow-paced gameplay with lockpicking, thinking, avoiding enemies, interrogating them, and making funny old man quips at them.
It looks like you forgot to shave this morning. Let me help you out a bit.
Die-hard veterans consider these 3, but especially Chaos Theory, to be the undefeatable pinnacle of the series. Then everything got split when the 4th game, Double Agent, came along. There were 2 versions of this game. Version 1 was made for the then modern consoles, the 360, the PC, and the PS3, all by Ubisoft Shanghai. It was meant to thrust the series into the next generation of gaming by changing the formula a bit, making things look nicer but also play easier and simpler. Except that for whatever reason, they only updated it on the 360, so PC and PS3 became these buggy, uncared-for messes. Just look at this! Version 2, despite the name indicating that it would come later, was made for the original Xbox, PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Wii by Ubisoft Montreal. A whole console generation behind. It kept to the traditional formula with the same visible stealth meters on the UI, akin to the previous games. This right here is where things start to split off. Forums online show that people had a love-hate relationship with how they handled the games. Some people were okay with the change. Some people thought it was bad as Sam Fisher being bald. So, when Conviction came out, all bets were off. After surviving development hell and a whole revisioning,
as you can see, it is an early build.
Conviction came out in 2010 and polarized Splinter Cell fans. Let's put in perspective. Look at how these games alone start. Chaos Theory. Slow. You start on a beach. It lets you take your time, get used to things. Everything is deliberately paced and slow and smooth, and you have a chance to really get a feel for how the game is going to play. Conviction thrusts you into being chased immediately and prepares you for action, and it's tense, and oh god, I'm shooting these dudes. Whoops, please, I'm sorry. Conviction is much more John Wick or Punisher than it is Splinter Cell. It had a greater focus on the action aspect of stealth action more than anything. And sure, you could stealth your way through it if you wanted, but the core of the game wasn't built around it. It was more gratifying than just mark and execute people and kill them versus actually sneak through. Is this necessarily a bad thing? Depending on who you ask, depends on the answer. Some people were okay with the change of pace, even if the pace was breakneck. There were people that enjoyed the difference between this and the last games. But of course, purists also disagreed with this new change because it was a shadow of a stealth game. If you showed 5 minutes of someone playing this, To a Splinter Cell fan who had never seen the game before, they'd likely look at you and say, "Ha, sick fan game, dicko, now show me a real Splinter Cell game." Fans of the games were, again, split down the middle. And then the cycle continued onto Blacklist. This is like a blend of mostly conviction with maybe a hint of, I don't know, Double Agent? Pandora Tomorrow? I haven't really seen people talk about Pandora Tomorrow. It seems okay. Was it just bad? I don't even... It's stealth action more so than conviction, sure, but it really hammers in on the action part of this. What's worse, an iconic part of the series was completely omitted. Sam Fisher's voice actor up until Blacklist was legendary actor Michael Ironside. His gravelly tones and deep voice effectively made the character of Sam Fisher. But for Blacklist, they changed it to, Eric Johnson, because he was also the mocap, I guess. And while change is inevitable and something does have to give at some point, many criticize the fact that they got someone noticeably younger, like the guy sounds like he's in his young 30s. I mean, oh, look at that. In 2013, he was in his young 30s. And I'm personally not against blind casting, but you think that his youth would come through in his vocal performance. Sam Fisher was in his mid-50s in Blacklist. He doesn't sound remotely like that.
You're not trying to set me up on another blind date, I hope.
The Maria Narcissa is a boat.
So was the last girl you set me up with.
Fisher.
Sorry.
Owen is too stupid to set that trap. Too smart to risk his own life sending us into it.
And I know Michael Ironside was unavailable due to health issues at the time, and he did reprise the role in 2019, thank God, but the casting at the time was just baffling, and if I'm getting this worked up about it, imagine how the fan base felt. But I guess his Rainbow Six voice actor is okay, but for myself and many others, Ironside is always and forever Sam Fisher.
I am Sam Fisher.
Blacklist was nothing special, and anything the game actually brought to the table was overshadowed by the problems that the fans had with it. So what's my point with all this? It's that people don't like change. When it comes to video games, changing the status quo is very, very hit and miss with the audience. Whether it's making the jump from 2D to 3D, making a silent protagonist talk, or outright changing the entire foundation of what made a game so great. Different actions lead to different, usually polarized reactions. Splinter Cell is certainly not exempt from this. So, with that in mind, let me set up my whole bigger point that I want to make. One thing that people especially love about Splinter Cell is the depth that the characters have. Like Sam Fisher, a no-nonsense agent for 3rd and then 4th Echelon, with a deep and troubled past that involves his only living daughter, Sarah Fisher. Sarah Fisher was the center point for numerous plots in the series, both in the games and in the novels. She was kidnapped twice, and then her death was faked to try and drag out a mole from 3rd Echelon because, story reasons. Naturally, because of this, Sam Fisher is extremely protective of his daughter, and would do anything to keep her safe and away from any of the danger that his line of work would invoke. So, imagine when Aconyte drops the news that she's now a Splinter Cell in this upcoming book, and it's like kicking a rabid dog in the teeth. Get it? Gas on the fire. Yeah, that's clever. I'm clever. Call me H-Bomber Guy, because I'm witty. Okay, so after Ubisoft made Sam Fisher into a marketable rabbit and then neutered what Splinter Cell meant to the fans, imagine seeing something like, "Hey, now Sam's daughter joins the fray. Everyone is here!" Aconyte Books, a longtime publisher of Ubisoft tie-ins, revealed at the end of 2021 that a new Splinter Cell novel would be released from March to June of 2022. Depending on your location. The novel synopsis is that a new threat from Sam's life re-emerges from death, and it's up to him and the new 4th Echelon recruit, Sarah Fisher, to defeat him. At face value, a seemingly very simple story, but to Splinter Cell fans, this was the end times.
I don't understand why Ubisoft keeps making these decisions. I mean, I'm sure they're fully aware of how the community feels, right?
No thank you.
Oh no. Oh no. Please don't turn that fanfic tier idea into a real thing. I'm upset because there's a woman in a book.
So, yeah, them introducing Sarah as the next generation of super spy is basically the narrative equivalent of putting dog shit and cat vomit into a blender and hitting frap.
His own daughter. For fuck's sake, no better ideas than this?
People were pissed. It got to a point where I found a comment that somebody had admitted to harassing Mr. Swallow on Twitter about this. I thought you were joking and saw the synopsis. I'm so fucking done.
You not alone. I already found Ryder on Twitter and ripped into him. Super normal response to being upset about a video game book, dude. Nailed it!
So I even went out and I asked people to fill out a small survey about how they felt about the upcoming book, and the overwhelming consensus was that they thought it was going to be bad. So here I am, a Splinter Cell fan myself and curious about the book. I reached out to Aconyte and by some crazy chance they allowed me to read the book early. They sent me an advanced reading copy, and after I promptly put it on my Kindle, and after 2 days or so of reading it, I can safely say, it's not as bad as you think. I mean, you probably garnered that from the title, but wow, this book was actually good. Like, normally it takes me a hot minute to read through these books, but this was a page-turner. James Swallow writing style lends itself well to espionage, light sci-fi reading, and I can safely say that it's extremely entertaining.
But Jam, isn't this biased because they gave you an early review copy?
I don't give a fuck if they sent me Swallow's first draft as soon as it was written. I reached out to them, and they were the ones who accepted my request. My opinion doesn't change when I read the book. I'd be saying the same thing after its official release anyway. So why don't we actually look at the heart of the matter and just see why it's good? Naturally, I'm not going to go over the whole book. I can't spoil anything because it's not out yet. I mean, I could, but then I'd just be a dick. So instead, I will ask and then answer a few pertinent questions that should help give a feel for how the book is and what to expect to get into. So I've already answered the what is this book as a whole, so just kind of go look at that again if you need. When is this book? The author's note places this in 2015, 2 years after Blacklist and 4 years before Operation Watchmen and Ghost Recon Wildlands. Okay, so we know exactly when this is, more or less. What the fuck is Ghost Recon? How does the book start? So we start with 3 unnamed operatives with designated code names and brief descriptions of who they are. All of them have their faces covered with a special material that completely obscures them. This is important. We start with Lynx, a woman of average build with dark brown shoulder-length hair. She could have blended into any crowd of tourists without making a ripple, but if you gave her a second look, meeting those sharp green eyes, you might have sensed something of the hard focus she kept hidden. She's our focal point for Chapter 1, and descriptions are from her perspective at first. Gator, a man who is a, quote, stock corn-fed ex-ranger. We don't see him after Chapter 2. And then Buzzard, the wiry New Yorker, forever pent up with nervous energy. Again, he's not important. Rip, Buzzard, I love you forever, homie. The 3 of them are chasing after a target codenamed Treble, and the other men besides the Lynx have vastly different experiences from her. Anyway, the more you get through Chapter 1 and know in the back of your head about the book's synopsis, you could figure out exactly who Lynx is. Everything kind of fully cements when you fully realize who Treble is with this description. Treble could not have missed her entrance, and from somewhere across the open space, Lynx heard a faint click, and then a high-pitched whine, like a camera flash charging. If you're a die-hard Splinter Cell fan, then you've already clocked who this is. After Treble wipes the floor with the 3 of them and ends in a pretty spectacular fashion, Lynx gets put into a chokehold by the target, Treble, but before she gets knocked out, her fingers found the black polymer combat knife tucked into a sheath pocket at her thigh and pulled it free, twisting it around in her grip. Her blood thundering in her ears, Lynx put her energy into forcing the blade up and back until the point pushed into the soft flesh of Treble's throat. She applied steady pressure against his Adam's apple and felt her opponent stiffen. The slightest motion of her hand would open his throat to the air. The chapter then ends with Treble saying a code phrase. It's then revealed to be a training exercise where the target's none other than Samfisher. Oh, who could have predicted that? So anyway, leading into the next chapter, now we can talk about 2 different questions in tandem as we continue. Who is in this book? Why is in this book? So I've already gone over Sam Fisher, Big Dick McGee, you know who it is. Next, as the simulation ends, we're introduced to Anna Grimm's daughter, or Grimm for short. This woman is effectively the devil, but like in a really charming and clever and devious way, and not so much the evil way. I mean, kinda evil, but like endearing. I say this because she's responsible for faking the death of Sam's daughter, Sarah, and she's lied multiple times to Sam Fisher for the sake of the mission. She is the epitome of gaslight gatekeep girl boss. As of the book, she is the director of 4th Echelon and the one overseeing the training simulation. She goes to talk to Sam afterwards and get his opinion on the candidates, who to him are still anonymous. Again, this is important. He only knows them by codename. Grimm may be the head of the program, but seeing as Sam has the most experience in the field, she defers to his judgment on if they pass or fail to become new Splinter Cell recruits. Do you see where this is going? Sam says no to Gator and Buzzard and they get sent packing. The tribe has spoken, they're voted off the island. They are not the next survivor, but with Lynx. And hey, you know what? If Blacklist can recast their characters, so can I.
What about her?
Grimm eyed him.
She almost got you a new smile, Sam.
Quick, admitted Fisher. Good instincts. Definitely the best of the three. He sighed. Green light. Grimm raised an eyebrow.
You're passing her.
You think I'm wrong?
No. In fact, I'm in full agreement with you. It's just rare to see it.
Grimm folded her arms. Grimm is being extremely coy with Sam because she knows something he don't know. And when that something gets revealed, Sam is not happy.
Don't get mad,
she said.
And believe me when I tell you, I'm doing this for the best of the agency.
As Lynx warily approached, Grimm gestured at the younger woman's face.
Take off your mask, please.
Lynx reluctantly peeled away the covering, revealing herself in full for the first time. She managed an awkward smile in Fisher's direction.
Hey, Dad,
she said. Sarah. Fisher froze, and his gaze turned flinty. There was a new contusion on his daughter's face that he had given her only moments ago, unaware of the fact that the woman who came closest to killing him in the mock engagement was his only child. What the hell is this?
This is trainee Lynx, aka Sarah Burns, aka Sarah Fisher.
Grimm stood her ground, waiting for the storm she knew would come.
Now you know why I insisted on anonymizing the recruit data for this exercise.
So Grimm, doing her devious thing again, tricks Sam Fisher into letting his own daughter become a Splinter Cell. And she also tricked him into decking the shit out of her. And he doesn't just lay down and take it either. He's fully fucking pissed.
If you had known Lynx was Sarah, you wouldn't have treated her impartially.
Grimm spoke over him, her voice like a whip crack.
I concealed her identity from you so that you would test her like Michaels and Rubicki, and push her as hard as she needed to go.
She opened her hands.
And you did just give her a passing grade.
He did?
Despite her fatigue, Sarah's eyes lit up. Rescinded, said Fisher. Red light.
Too late for that,
Grimm said firmly.
Sarah's in the top percentile of our evaluation. She's excelled in all areas.
So Grimm is just smarmy about the whole thing and fools Sam into realizing that Sarah is okay as an operative. When she puts up her "I'm the boss, what I say goes" attitude, Sam has no choice but to relent. Although he doesn't immediately. He's lukewarm like, fuck, I see you're an adult now, I really have no choice but to kinda let it go for now, cause Grimm's right, I hate that she is, blah. I personally have no qualms with how this is handled. Especially because, even until far into the book, he still doesn't approve of it. Like, later on, when he says this of all things.
I don't disagree,
said Grimm.
That's why I'm going to provisionally activate Sarah. She can act as your Overwatch.
No fucking way. Fisher rarely cursed in front of her, but now he ground out the words like bits of broken glass. I'm not putting my girl in that man's crosshairs.
She's not a girl, Sam,
Grimm said harshly.
She can handle herself. And if you took off the daddy blinders for a moment, you might be able to see it.
He actually swears! This isn't something we usually see in the games, if ever. I can't recall too many times where he said anything beyond shit or damn. I know he has, but the point is that he's so upset at Grimm suggesting that Sarah be activated under him. He's adamant about it not happening. This is chapters after she's introduced, which leads to moments between Sam and Sarah where they talk not just about her joining 4th Echelon, but also about each other and her feelings. There's a really tender moment in Chapter 8 where they have a heart-to-heart to get her feelings out, and without spoiling the full conversation of what's said between them, it does answer another burning question that Splinter Cell fans have had since this was announced. Why does Sarah join 4th Echelon? And very simply, and in my opinion reasonably, because she's been a victim of having power stripped away from her, and seeing that there's so many people who are affected by things like she's been through, she wants to give back. In short,
you want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else,
he said.
Yes.
She put down the rifle and folded her arms.
Being a victim can make you feel powerless. I want to take back the power taken from me and use it against the monsters out there in the darkness.
Fisher let her words sink in. It was hard to hear, but he understood.
She's more like me than I ever realized.
There's a lot more to this conversation, but it's an extremely good and heartfelt moment that solidifies that everyone's worries about how this was going to be handled were for nothing. James Swallow did extremely well to make sure that this made sense, and it does, and I personally love it. It turns this into a story of empowerment and recovery. It's new, it's different, and it's good. It's needed when we have a drought of good Splinter Cell content to actually have something as thoughtful as this. Okay, but there's more to the book than just father-daughter time, so what gives? So yeah, of course, there's still a few other things to cover about the novel that might further assuage fans who are on the fence. So here's another good who question. Who is the big bad of the big novel? Well, there's actually two in this book. The first, and more serious one, is a completely new figure named Dima Aslanov. Aslanov, also known as Stone, is the exact foil of Sam Fisher. Russian, ruthless, deadly. He's as stoic and serious about his line of work as Sam is. It actually phases Sam to his core to think about Dima Aslanov, because he's just that cold of a motherfucker. Aslanov and Sam have history, and Aslanov was long presumed dead. He got better, and now works for the other antagonist in this book, Brody Teague. Brody Teague is a conglomerate who has illusions of grandeur. He's self-centered, a narcissist, an egotist, and more importantly, dangerously rich. We're introduced to him via the perspective of Charlie Cole, a returning character from Blacklist who now actually has more character this time. Brody Teague hires Aslanov as a personal bodyguard, and to get a good sense of both of their personalities, Teague is pissed at Aslanov because he's not a yes man and calls him out like, dude, you're just a rich man child. I'm actually doing work for you. So Teague says,
no.
Teague shook his head.
I'm not happy with my service. 0-star rating. I'm unconvinced.
He jabbed a finger at his two bodyguards, who stood impassively at either side of the executive elevator.
Retire him,
he demanded. The two men exchanged looks.
You mean here?
One of them ventured the question, as his colleague drew a Beretta M9 semi-automatic from beneath his jacket.
Right here on this shitty rug,
shouted Teague, his voice cracking.
So I can see.
He's kind of pathetic, but then it leads to Aslanov doing some crazy shit, and we get a good taste of Swallow riding action. Stone moved much faster than one would have expected from a man his age. He shifted in place, one hand coming up to snag the barrel of the Beretta, giving it a savage twist. The bodyguard grunted in pain as his wrist bent the wrong way, bones grinding against one another. He had a weapon of his own, of course. He never traveled without it. But he saw no need to draw it here, for a matter so trivial. His momentum pushed him up, out of the chair, and he continued the move, drawing a wet snap from the man's wrist. With his other hand, he fired a punch into the nerve plexus at the base of the bodyguard's throat, robbing him of the chance to cry out. Wheezing and gripping his broken wrist,
The bodyguard stumbled backwards.
It's brutal, and he just has no filter when it comes to this. He's intimidating and harsh, and this isn't even half of what he's capable of. Here's a bonus, Brody responding like the fuckboy he is.
Aslanov disarmed the second man and turned back towards Teague, who laughed and clapped as if he were a child at the circus.
All right, that's what I'm talking about.
Many people have tried to retire me, he explained. I have buried them all.
I believe it. This pair of pricks, they'd smoke any ordinary old guy, but not you, huh? Cool. I take back what I said, your skills are sharp.
He sighed, then smiled.
Honestly, I was thinking you killed them both, but you have control as well as edge, don't you? Impressive. 5 stars.
God, this guy's actually the worst. He's a shithead crypto bro fuckboy poser with too much money. It's kind of funny to read him just be an awful human being. Anyway, his overall plan is the development of a project he has called the Gordian Sword, which is an extremely dangerous piece of technology capable of cutting through any firewall in existence. That is to say, if ever in the wrong hands, then it could be apocalyptic in the digital age that we live in now. Everything in the book, from cover to cover, was very well done and satisfying. The conclusion to the book is even more so satisfying and well done. As it stands, I highly recommend you read it if you're a Splinter Cell fan. Seeing as this is an early copy, I can't give it a final grade yet, but I'll give it a tentative A ranking for now. Quite honestly, I can't say that anything in this book is outright awful. Maybe 1 or 2 pacing things here and there. Weirdly, I kind of wish we had a bit more of Sarah in the book. Not in terms of quantitative scenes, maybe in quantitative scenes, but maybe if they just went a little more in depth. It's a bit ironic that the main problem that people have with this book was that Sarah Fisher was in it, but honestly, I kind of wanted just a bit more. It wasn't bad with what we got, but I guess me personally, I would have liked a bit more. Also, Coben appears, a fan favorite from Conviction and Blacklist. He's funny as fuck, and I love Elias Toufexis, and I hope he gets a ton more work in the future. Also, not every character from Blacklist appears. Isaac Briggs, supporting character and co-op playable character from Blacklist, is, quote, off on a mission elsewhere, or some shit, so he ain't there. Splinter Cell Firewall was a crazy ride from start to finish, and I highly recommend it for anyone who has an inkling of love for Splinter Cell. You'd be vastly surprised how much your expectations would be subverted, and just how good the quality of the novel is. From the good action, the excellent capturing of the characters, the well-done story and beats, Firewall is getting a full purchase for me when it drops on, why the fuck is it dropping on different days in different regions? That's so weird. March for Americans, June for the Briticans. I recommend you get yourself a copy when it drops. Mr. Swallow does excellent work, and this is the second novel from him to get an A from me. One other cute thing that Swallow does is drop hints towards other Tom Clancy and Ubisoft IPs existing in the universe. I won't spoil what it was, but it was kind of nice, and it didn't really break immersion at all. Hey, speaking of Ubisoft, they abuse their employees. I cannot rightly discuss Ubisoft without bringing up the fact that news outlet after news outlet has reported that employees are being allegedly abused in the workplace. 1 in 4 employees have reported sexual harassment, misconduct, sexism, racism, and an overall toxic workplace, according to a third-party survey conducted within a company. As I've gone over in my Batman video, game development has been subject to becoming a toxic workplace for far longer than it's needed to. And while this time the company didn't seem to interfere with the quality of this book, it still leaves a lot to think about and consider when they haven't been open about the future of the series and have refused to comment on supplemental media like this. Their mind appears to be in what they believe will sell, when it may or may not actually. Hell, they're looking into NFT development and support, and that's an economic, environmental disaster waiting to happen that they don't care about, as it serves to line their own pockets. And while they announce that they're remaking Splinter Cell, all of this makes you wonder if they're just doing it to appease fans. There's no info, no development started, nothing, just an announcement to generate hype and make everyone gloss over the fact that the company is contributing to a dangerous, toxic environment that's become stereotypical with game development. And while they say they're doing something, the problem is that the last we've heard is that the employees are saying otherwise. And I cannot stress this enough, that Ubisoft pursuing NFTs is a terrible, terrible idea. Folding Ideas did a fantastic video about why they're garbage, and I recommend you watch it there. But the fact remains that Ubisoft is making terrible business decisions left and right. All of this to say, of course, you shouldn't avoid supporting this book. Aconyte and James Swallow have no direct affiliation or involvement with Ubisoft and their workplace itself. This is simply a piece of tie-in fiction that Ubisoft granted the right for them to write, and they don't make as much money off of this as they do their games. The money mainly goes to Mr. Swallow and Aconyte. I recommend you not only support them, but also the employees at Ubisoft who have been facing this kind of abuse for years now. All of that aside, I decided to reach out to Mr. Swallow again about the book and the writing as a whole. But unfortunately, again, due to scheduling issues, I could not get a hold of him, so we're not going to have as much insight, but it is what it is. Which, of course, leads me to my final point. While the fan reaction has been a loud uproar, it begs the question, is it warranted? Considering how Ubisoft has been treating the Splinter Cell series poorly, by extension you can say they've been treating the fans likewise. Ubisoft has been coming out with these seemingly spur-of-the-moment decisions on where to take the series that, without any context, seem just baffling and unnecessary to the patient fans who simply want another game. Why come out with this major change to the series and the lore of Sarah becoming a 4th echelon agent if they're just gonna remake the first game and retcon it anyway? If they do, what kind of remake is it even going to be? A complete overhaul and rebooting, or a one-to-one remaster that keeps in the lore? And ultimately, what does it all mean for the books, the story, everything? Here's one reason I think people are getting upset. Not just because they've decided to up and add Sarah to a group she doesn't normally belong in, but because Ubisoft has not and does not communicate how or why it would make sense or benefit the franchise. Sure, it's just a ploy to get people to actually purchase and read the book, but that just adds to the continued frustration the fans are harboring towards Ubisoft. The people behind the franchise don't communicate properly with their fan base, arguably the most important people to them, about what they want to do with the series, and seemingly just backpedal all over the place with their decisions. But then you also do have to remember many Ubisoft titles where a woman as the protagonist have also been less than stellarly reviewed. But is that due in complete part to toxic gamer culture, or inherently the game design itself? It's a question that cycles back into itself time after time, especially considering how Ubisoft themselves had said that, and I quote, "women don't sell games." Admittedly, this point can be rendered somewhat moot when you consider that Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla sold decently when they were advertised primarily with a female protagonist. And a female protagonist was purportedly chosen more so than the male counterpart at that. So is the backlash justified? Attacking the author who doesn't ultimately have a super great amount of input towards the series as a whole isn't a rational move, especially considering he took such a convoluted and controversial idea and successfully turned it into a great piece of work. But is it fair to be mad at Ubisoft? To be mad at them mishandling such a beloved IP and characters? To be mad at them mistreating fans and employees? To be mad at them for not being clear about their vision with Splinter Cell? That, I would say, is less black and white than anybody would like. If you really like this video, leave me a tip on coffee. I don't have Patreon yet because I have 100 subscribers. What am I gonna do? That's nothing. Just, if you like it and you see it, just go ahead. I don't care. Or if not, whatever. Just subscribe, like it. Yeah, go fight win. Thank you everybody listed for their help with this. You all are beautiful. Thank you, and good night.